Good afternoon and morning to some. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar. So welcome. Before we get started, just want to do a couple of quick housekeeping notes. So this webinar is being recorded. And at the end of this webinar, we will post the webinar on our website, sci-far.org. And also the slides will also be shared. And as we go along today, we ask that for our presenters that you would just go ahead and drop anything that you would like to discuss in the chat box. But if you have specific questions, please use the Q&A function so that we know to make sure that we're getting those questions to our presenters today. Your feedback is very valuable to us. So at the end, there will be a pop-up. We ask that you just go ahead and fill out that survey to let us know how we're doing, what kind of webinars you would like to see, and give us some more feedback. So now that we have those housekeeping items out the way, we're going to jump right in and get started. Today, we have with us Dr. Anindita Das from Iowa State University. We also have Mitch Mason out of the University of Maine. And we also have Marilu Andon out of the University of Illinois. And today they're going to be presenting on inclusion for immigrant and refugee youth and 4-H4 practitioners. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them.
Welcome to you all. I hope you all are having a good morning, a good afternoon, wherever you are. Just wanted to talk to you a little bit about this is part of our working group for the Access, Equity, Belonging Committee out of the Program Leaders Working Group. That's what you see in our logo. Next slide, please. As Phil was mentioning, these are us. We just have a slide, but we would like you all to respond to your name and your role. Here is the link so that you can use the link. And we want you to use the link because throughout the presentation, we will be asking you to participate with us in engagement, small activities. So if you could just log in right now and enter your name, that would be very kind. Just kind of a little bit about myself. My name is Anindita, and I see some of you from Iowa and other places whom I know. I came to this country as an immigrant, trying to get to do my PhD. I chose to come to US and I chose what subject I wanted to study. So it was all voluntary and my decision was mine. Nobody forced me to be here in this country. And that's part of my story, which kind of very much connects to the professional work I do. I'm very much passionate about these youths and these families and these communities because some of the things that I have experienced, I like that others who are coming back later after me also have some of the positive experiences that I had and do not have the same challenges that I have had when I came in. So that was our reason, some of us, to kind of think about how we can create access an opportunity for immigrant and refugee youth. And that's what our group does. And if you would go to the slide that has our group members' name. This is our group, and it is consists of 10 extension staff members, and it's part of a larger collective. Just a second, am I supposed to be doing that one, or who is supposed?
Oh, that's okay, go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, we are all our 10 staff members who participate and represent 9 institutions. And these are the members of the member institution that participate with us. Mitch, do you want to add something since I took over your slide?
No, that's okay. Yeah, just what you had said. And there are, I think, 12 other, I believe, champion groups besides the Immigrant and Refugee Youth Champions Group that seek to enhance the staff's ability to work with, engage, and help the communities, different communities. So, and we'll have a link later to that webpage so that you all can investigate the Access, Equity, and Belonging Committee.
Next slide, please. This webinar is aimed at practitioners and frontline staff members at extension offices that serve and are interested to serve refugee and immigrant audiences and are looking to better understand and provide culturally appropriate services for these communities. So it doesn't matter, we, three of us tend to focus on young people, but some of these lessons can be used for families and communities that want to serve refugee and immigrant audiences. This is our three goals for this presentation. The social, cultural, and emotional conditions that affect participation in programs, and then the social, cultural, and emotional conditions that are nested and impacted by immigrant and refugee youth. And then we are also going to share with you some of the promising practices that we have learned or we have collected or curated over the years from different, extension programs. I think the last thing I have right now is I want you all, please, next slide, please. I want you all to kind of share, you can chat or you can open your mic and share, but we were hoping if you could respond to this in this yellow sticky that what are some of the facts that you know about immigrant and refugee youth, if any? If you worked with them, if you know anything, if you would like to share with us. Oh yeah, lack of family concentration.
Hello, this is Rosa Gonzalez, and some of the things that I see is they may come with not having experiences participating in activities or programs. They don't know, they don't have these experiences. As well, it's very interesting. Dr. Annie, you mentioned I came here because I want to. Some of these kids may not be here because they want to be here. Some they were brought just because they didn't have another option. I will say also being separated for their families in many cases. That can be another fact that many of those kids came from.
Thank you. Thank you. That's exactly right. Like we're going to go over that. Like everybody's path is very different from that of other. And I see a lot of information coming through chat now. I really appreciate the Rosa for standing up and sharing your thoughts. I appreciate it. Yep. We're going to talk about it. Marilu, do you want to start your story, your slide now?
Yes. So again, my name is Marilu Andon. I am currently a county director in Kankakee, Grundy, and Will, and that's in Illinois. We're like in the middle of the state. I came in the U.S. When I was a child. My parents migrated to the U.S. When I was, I want to say, about 7 years old, and they left us behind. They did bring us back 2-3 years after, and I came in with my brothers, or we were brought in. We, crossed the border, and we went through some of the things that some of the families are migrating, are currently going through, learn a new language, left everything behind, friends, school. I started in 3rd grade here, and I had to get used to the school system. My parents had to, learn that, and I became the interpreter. I became the translator. And I had to, just get used to everything. When I was in high school, there was the pressure of getting your driver's license. And so we needed a Social Security. My parents gave me a Social Security card just to find out after the 1986 amnesty that the Social Security number that they had given me was incorrect. And thankfully, back then, I mean, we were still breaking the law, obviously, but I didn't have to, pay any consequences. All I had to do was bring my new card, my residency card, and my social security card, and they were able to change it. So now with going through, just the whole educational system, culture, language, it was intimidating. Nonetheless, I managed to get my education. I have a master's in business administration and a master's in educational instructional leadership. And I've been with Extension for 30 years.
Can you share the slide again, Phil? Thank you. The next slide, please. So, you all shared a lot of stories. If you want, I can read some of them. It's slide number 11, Phil. The act of family connection or lack of family connection. And some of the, I'm just sharing some that people read out. And then some come with significant trauma, having existing culture that may or may not align with where they live now, need for positive adult support mentors. Migration often involves separation of families and change of roles, and then come to build new life and citizenship. School systems are different. Most immigrant youth by age of 8 are bilingual. I can make assumptions about fact. Everyone's experience is different. I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing those. And then slide number 11, please. And so we talked about all these different people coming. Just to kind of keep in mind, United States is one of those countries that has immigrants from all over the world. And if you look at the number, this is the number from 2021, 45,200 immigrants who came from different countries to the United States in 2021, and almost every country in the world, and each with diverse sets of needs and experiences. And you know that if these many number of people are coming in, imagine the different counties and states we are in. They're in every county, every state, so that's why we need to understand the needs and also their experiences, which is very crucial for the programming we do. Next slide, please. This is the number. If you look at the 18,000, I don't even know how to tell these numbers. This is the number in 2021, the number of 18,000. How do I say this? 18 million?
Million.
Yeah, 18 million number of children in the US who are children of immigrants. That means one of their parents came to this country to study, or they moved because there was some trauma in their country, and they were born in this country, or they were very little when they came in. So 1 in 4 US children have at least one immigrant parent. So that is like one data piece that I would definitely want you to remember when you are going away from this webinar. Next slide, please. And it's an assumption that, Mexican immigrants are the highest, coming immigrant population. But in 2021, when the census was facilitated, we came to realize that the largest immigrant populations are actually coming, who are the fastest, coming immigrant populations are from India and China, and the Mexican population is declining. Any guesses there why it is such the case? You can write in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and talk. If you raise your hands, then. I see Rosa's hand, tech industry. Rosa, what's your thought on that?
Well, I will want to guess that is because all the effort that has been happening in the border, in the south border, making sure that people is not crossing, and making the assumption that everybody comes through that border. when that everybody comes through the border.
Thank
But
you.
it's my assumption. I don't know.
No, you're right. So to some extent, that is the assumption that is correct, but then also the assumption that what is the policy that is happening, or what kind of narrative about the policy that is happening is also impacting who is coming and who is not coming. And imagine that narrative, it is done in such a way that it stops some people from coming and it allows some people to come. So that is a big part of US immigration policy. There is a big need for, somebody wrote over here, the tech industry. There is a big need for tech employees. So that's the reason they have made the visa for Indian immigrants to come to the US, but they are not here as H1 visa people. They are here as just employment. They come here temporarily to work in the US. So we have to remember that, the policies that are around immigration are very much based on the needs of the American economy, but also the policy, the racist policy that exists behind it. So I just wanted to put that into your radar because, we all think that, Mexican or Latino population are the fastest growing ones, but they're actually, the speed is declining at the moment. Marilu, please take it away.
Yes, and so in extension, especially in 4-H, we or our responsibility is to serve all youth and families and also to ensure that our programs are not only accessible but also equitable. And to achieve this, we must consistently prioritize and consider the social, emotional, and cultural factors at the forefront of our programs. Next slide. So in my part, I will share a few of the most common statuses. So depending on the region that you serve, you will encounter youth in various immigration statuses, including those in regularized status, liminal status, and second generation status. Regularized status is having a legal status of some kind that will allow the families and youth to stay in the U.S. legally while their case is pending. Liminal status is that one that's like in between status where they may have applied for temporary visas after entering the country. However, many are awaiting adjudication of federal immigration reform. One of those groups is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and better known as DACA. So this program offers eligible immigrants temporary renewable administrative relief for 2 years. And this was announced by the Homeland Security in June 15 of 2012. And it is available to individuals who came to the United States as children. They have to meet, or they had to meet certain criteria. And so moving forward, they are renewing their statuses every 2 years. If approved, they do receive a work authorization permit. They do receive a Social Security card. However, their stay is uncertain because depending on administrations in the White House, it may cause mental health concerns for these students and families altogether. They know that they have to fulfill certain requirements like staying in school, not have any run-ins with the law. They have to continue to prove their residency in the US. Currently, there are 24 states that allow undocumented immigrants to pay in-state tuition. And that was a big deal for a while because like you live here, but you're not a permanent resident. So with those states allowing students to use their state as their residency, they are able to apply for some of the aid. However, they do not qualify for FAFSA which means they don't qualify for student loans or any federal financial aid because of their status. I also like to point out that some states do provide financial aid to DACA recipients, so they will have them apply for the in-state financial aid. On the other hand, asylum seekers and accompanied minors also fall under the liminal status. Second generation status are those that are these are citizen children who live in families with one or more parents who are unauthorized to be in the U.S. So according to the Immigration Initiative at Harvard, an estimated 4.9 million children are living with an undocumented parent, and almost a million more who reside with extended family members with precarious status. Next slide. Refugees and asylum seekers. So refugees undergo thorough vetting before arriving in the U.S. And after their arrival, they may apply for lawful permanent resident or the green card status 1 year later. And they may also face challenges related to displacement, language acquisition, and cultural adjustment. An asylee is an individual who fits the refugee definition and is either already present in the United States or is seeking admission at a port of entry. They can apply for green card status 1 year after being granted asylum. Refugee youth are generally more likely to obtain legal status in the United States than asylum seekers. And regardless of their circumstances, it is likely that at some point they may have encountered some traumatic event. Consequently, it is crucial to acknowledge that some youth might be coping with post-traumatic disorder or psychological trauma. Therefore, keeping in mind and engaging youth and their families in positive youth development activities might require innovative approaches to be fully effective. Next slide. And then we also have students with interrupted or inconsistent formal education. And these could be some youth that may not have had the opportunity for consistent formal education or continuous attendance in school, which can result in their reading and math skills or scores lagging their peers by 2 grade levels. So again, this could be because they keep moving from one location to another. I know in Cook County, we had some migrants that would live in one suburb, but then would be constantly moving to the farm areas and bringing the families along. And so they wouldn't stay in one grade or attending consecutively in each one of those. Next slide. So now that I've shared some information with you, would you please share in the chat 3 pieces of information that you will be taking away with you about the immigrant and refugee statuses? So when working with youth, I would also, I know that we don't come with the background like with my story or the way Ani came in. So what I've seen working too is always be open. Do not make assumptions. Sometimes we, when, we have to document the ethnic, so the REG, race, ethnicity, and gender, we make a lot of assumptions. And so that's one. Another may be that the student is not cooperating or they're not engaging. And so again, at the beginning of my part, I say there's a lot of things that come, or a lot of baggage that come with the youth. And so we have to be really mindful of how we approach them.
I think somebody said these families are dealing with a lot of stress and uncertainty and need support for traumatic experiences, regardless of how they arrive. They are our audience. And then they have a diverse set of needs. And
Yes.
somebody said our organization does a family night about navigating the US education system. We need to do some more research about more resources that we can provide financially. Yes, that's what something I'm working a lot on. I can say that. Changes in population differs with communities, impact of formal living for literacy, math, differences in stability for refugee and asylum seekers, all different experiences and needs. And then hard for kids to have different status than their families. Yes, that's very hard. I think next slide. Yes. We have this question that we want, because we want to know what resources and assets do immigrant parents and youth bring that would benefit our community. We want you to respond in the slide, please, if you can, because we want to know what have you seen? What resource and assets do immigrant parents and youth bring to our organization, to Extension, and how that would benefit our community? Cultural diversity. I see somebody writing in the chat. Yeah, that's also fine. Just keep writing in the chat and I'll add it to the, but we want to know what are your thoughts on that? Inclusion, cultural diversity. Yeah. Those are some of the things that they do bring, cultural diversity. And, as much as we think that we in Extension are doing a service to others by taking in or serving refugee and immigrant audiences, it is in some way, I can say that the educational outreach that we do, it is actually providing a support to our communities. Because if we are providing that awareness for refugee and immigrant audiences, their needs, we're actually making our community, globally much more aware. Because imagine our kids going and our youths going and working. They're not ever going to be working in the same setup that they grew up in. They will go and they'll go out of their rural communities to larger locations. They should be knowing how to work with different groups of people. So I think in some ways, we're serving refugee and immigrant groups. We're also doing a service to all youths. Okay, next slide, please. Marley, you talked about the different groups and the different statuses that you see, and sometimes we do not know a lot about it. And we feel that, oh, they're not responding to us, or though they're not, working with us. But it's actually, immigration is a very transformative process, and it impacts the whole child, their family, because their context, which becomes so unique to them, the processes become so profound for the family. And it's like the social, emotional, cultural development of the individual just gets transformed. It is like something you learn through the process that you can never unlearn it again. It just changes completely for life, and even, next slide, please. Even immigrants who are coming from the same country often differ greatly in legal statuses, the level of familial support, and personal experiences. For that reason, understanding the context of immigration is essential for educators who seek to engage in these populations. Like some of the 4-H folks, if you look at the thriving model, the base of the tree, the context is very powerful in this. In the work, if you want to serve the refugee and immigrant audiences, it's very powerful. The context is very powerful. So just like in this presentation, me and Marilu, we are both immigrants, but our experiences of how we came to this country is very different from when we arrive here and our experiences from it. For example, migrants living in Central America's Northern Triangle, the El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, which the United Nations actually calls that one of the most dangerous part of the world, are often running for their lives, and they enter United States, and these individuals face gang violence, threats, domestic violence, sexual violence in their home countries before coming here. And during the perilous journey, they may also endure extreme weather and starvation, and the terrains through which they are coming in, and the thirst and the manipulation of those what are those people called? Who kind of engage them in sexual assault, the smugglers, that kind of manipulate their trip, or they help them, but in some way manipulate them as human beings. And then when they reach here, the depression and anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder are common mental health issues among migrants who experience such trauma. So, even people who are coming from, the same places, you will think that it is their experiences might be same, but no, it's very different. And also in these whole things, somebody who might have little bit more economic advantage, their experience also might be different, even though they're coming from El Salvador or Guatemala or Honduras. So everything changes. The whole scenario of how they are coming to where they are coming, all those things are very different. For example, we talked about life before. They might have a good life, and while in the journey they might experience bad experiences or trauma, but some may have a very easy one. But once they come to this country, there is a lot of adjustment. And even for those who have language abilities, their adjustment might be slightly easier compared to those who do not have the language. Or somebody who has educational access might have a better experience. They are learned in their own language. They might have, even though they don't know English, but learning another language when you are proficient in your own language might become easy for you. So all these things are very, very, there is no linear path. There's different. Upon reaching United States, immigrants from around the world face additional hurdles in navigating the immigration system, finding a job, overcoming language and cultural barriers. At this stage, many immigrants of color, for the first time, realize that, oh, I'm a person of color. That's what they realize. And then may have like a mental health issue. For others, where for some families who have language access, for them, finding their children's identity and acculturation process might be primary concerns. So it's not about the hardships, but more about how they will transition to these spaces. So by any measure, if you think about immigration can be very stressful that a family undergoes, removing many of the family members from predictable context, to community ties, to jobs and customs, stripping them out of all those social ties. Our strength lies in our social capital, in our social connections. And those things, if they are gone, our extended family members are gone, best friends are gone, our neighbors are gone, our celebrations become very insignificant for us. So all those things are very, very powerful, And despite all these myriad of challenges, immigrants are extremely resilient. Used to think about there's a lot of research done on immigrants' mental health upon arrival. So there is a health immigrant paradox. It's it suggests that upon arrival, immigrants are actually better mental health than non-immigrant citizens in this country. But once they settle in, mental health tends to decline because they have to make their life go by, and making support for mental, psychological, well-being becomes a challenge when they know that, oh, I have to get to know my community and really restart their life from feeling like a displaced person. So as educators, to be effective, it is our responsibility to construct the novel view of immigration, not merely as that we need to, get some of these immigrant population or audiences in our program, but as a conceptual lens through which we understand ourselves and the world around us and make informed decisions. So how you're going to start your program planning to implementation to evaluation is a very, very strategic and informed decision. So if you are trying to serve refugees from Africa, the needs might be very different from those if you are having immigrants from Africa. so that their needs are very different. This immigrant and refugee, exists within a unique social context for most of the vulnerable population, resulting in exceptional challenges. So we just kind of list out, can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, we've just listed out some of the typical challenges, and you can find this, a result of this from our fact sheet. Can somebody send the link on the fact sheet in the chat? That would be wonderful. So for example, as immigrants, the number one challenge would be that.
Ani, I'm going to send that link a little bit later.
Okay.
It's ready. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The English language learner, and is it possible to adapt displacement from one country where, when you're forced or obligated to flee, is very different because of violence, lack of job security, so displacement is very different. And so adapting to that and understanding that, am I going to have to be hopeful that, am I going to have a good life in this new space, can be hard. And then the same thing goes for the isolation that people go through, the traumatic life experiences, the discrimination leading to psychological and emotional effects. All those things come into play immediately as soon as the person comes in. And then, as Marilu had pointed a little bit about the government documents, social security requirements, and short-term foster families, for those unaccompanied minors, when they come in, they have to live with someone most of the time. We do a good job of putting them in family homes, but some family homes may not be not be ideal for these children. And then also there are some families that come here, they cannot go back because of the legal status is still pending in their community. And then above all of this, even if you came to this country from very lot of wealth, but when you're first here, it takes time to make up for that wealth, even if you can, So family, definitely there is a poverty level that you have to think about. You have to think about how to manage your money, how much money you have. Like, for example, refugees, they get a certain amount of money to live in this country. And so they have to manage within that. Within 3 months, in 90 days, they have to find a job, they have to find a house. So everything, it's not so easy. And imagine somebody doesn't know how to speak. And so all those things can have a challenge. And then I think Marilu pointed to the little bit about the age and grade level. So a limited English language can be a challenge, but imagine when you come to this country, you've lived all your life in that camp, and you've come to this country, you do not have language proficiency in your own language, but you're already 15 years of age. By the time you come into the school system, you're ready to be thrown out of the school system. So you will never have the opportunity to finish that degree. So it's very important that we kind of pay attention to these, these challenges that families go through. Next slide, please. So for our work, we have often tried to use models or theoretical frameworks that makes our job easy to understand these populations. One of the models that we appreciate completely is the Berners model, the bioecological model. So this model specifically talks about how individual development is influenced by the series of these interconnected circles, the extended family, the microsystem, the exosystem, which is the extended family support, the school board, neighborhood, it could be organizations that are resettling the people, and then the microsystem, the laws, the policies. Like, I'm thinking somebody who's coming as an immigrant to Iowa versus somebody who's going to Minnesota might have a completely different experience. The bioecological model is based on the idea that the relationships of children have with their parents and caregivers impact their development, and these relationships affect by their work, their school, their community setting, in which in turn affected by the broader social, cultural, and policy conditions. So all of these conditions that an individual goes through or is thrived or nested in has a significant impact on the individual's sense of being and feeling of thrive or not. Can you move to the next slide, please? And the other practice that we want all of you who want to work with these audiences to pay attention to is the trauma-informed care of practices. The refugee and immigrant children and their, their shared common experience of trauma due to exposure of violence and separation from family members is very powerful if you can keep that in context, because then you will tend to focus on the strengths of the population. Then you will have a growth mindset when you are looking at these groups of people and providing support, instead of focusing on what is wrong with the community or what is wrong with this youth that they are not responding to us. We will focus on the question, what happened to this youth that this youth does not make eye contact? What happened to their community that they are not responding? What happened to their community that they are not responding to us? Is there something to do with the organization? Do they trust us? So our way of looking at or thinking of programming will completely change. And also because the services would consider the context of the youth, their life situation at the past, and present and provide effective services. So that's one other way that we want you to focus on. There is a question over here, but I think I will pass because of the time, since it's already a little bit over time. But I want you to go to the next slide, please. There's another lens that we want you, next slide, please. We want you to focus on is this community integration model, because I know that when we are in extension, we tend to collaborate with the people or the groups of people that we need to work with to make our ends meet. But when you're working with the refugee audiences, this is a model that the refugee resettlement groups focus on. And in my past life, I used to work for Extension as a refugee specialist, and we often use this model to serve our refugee communities. The strength of this model lies in the way that you look at a refugee family or a refugee youth, and then you think about these wraparound services. You don't think about serving these audiences by, in a isolation. You serve these audiences in collaboration with other service providers. You tend to pay attention to the medical service providers. What kind of support do they have that you can provide to these youths, or what kind of legal professional support? Because many of our youth, if you know, that they are also serving many other roles in their home life, apart from being a young person. Their families' lawyers, they read their families' tax returns, they read and connect their families with resources. So if we can provide these young people or these families with these resources from our community, our job will be much more efficient, because we have to provide those wraparound support, like connecting them with jobs, connecting them or reviewing their resumes. They may not be directly connected to our extension offices, those legal professionals, or the community organizations or universities or colleges, but we have to do that for these when we want to serve these audiences. So that's why we like this model. It's called the community integration model. You might want to look into it. It's a really powerful model, or the way you look at it, it's very much more focusing on the collaborative strength of service providers. I think that's about it. I think we can go to the discussion in slide number 30, I think, or maybe. Yeah, the previous one. Yeah. So we want from you, if you have a framework that you've been using, please share with us so that we can review and see if it works for refugee and immigrant communities. If you are using any of the framework that from your own work, please do share with us.
Or even if you use one of the ones that we've mentioned, that way we know more people are using those models.
Next slide, please.
All right. So the last thing we want to do before we have our evaluation is talk a few minutes about promising practices. And this list of promising practices can be very long. I know some of the folks that are participating have been working in this community or other communities for a long time. So I know we don't have enough time to hit all of the promising practices. But if you are new to working with this audience, or you're experienced but have staff that are new, some of these promising practices might be helpful. And Phil, if you could move to the next slide. So some of the promising practice we want to quickly bring up, refer a little bit back to Bronfenbrenner's model. taking the whole child approach, looking at all the different influences in the environment for the child. If you're a staff and you want to work with this audience, you need to take that whole child approach. Understanding the effects of trauma. And we've had several comments from participants about trauma being an impact on this youth and their families. Having culturally responsive and intentional programming. That is incredibly important, and it often reflects the individual audiences you're working with. I work with a lot of young people and families that are Muslim. There's a lot of very specific culturally responsive program planning and curriculum ideas that we need to include to make sure that those folks are included. Another one is engaging in professional development, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the next slide, but making sure people have access to information. And then finally, extension as a resource, making sure, making sure extension is creating access for education and opportunities. And sometimes we, as the staff who want to work with this audience, have to push our own systems to create that access. So it's not just planning, it's also advocating for access. And then finally, creating welcoming spaces. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And one of the aspects of getting this work done is what I call doing your homework. So if you're a staff member who hasn't worked with this community, or if you're a staff member who is an immigrant, but you're working with an entirely different group who is not part of your culture, one of the key things we have to remind ourselves and keep pushing is that we have to go out and explore and learn from the community. We have to embed ourselves into the community, which takes time, which takes cultural humility, it takes patience, and it takes a commitment from our administrators and our organizations to give us the space to go and learn and explore. You know, extension didn't happen in a vacuum. Extension, when it came about, was embedded in the community. So we shouldn't expect us to have successful programs for displaced families if we're not in those communities and learning. And that might look like a lot of different ways. You might be a staff member who goes and volunteers at an outreach center that works with the community. You might teach STEM at an after-school program just to be around the kids and learn from them. One of the things I did early on was to mentor a young person from Iraq. So get out there and learn from the community. Go ahead and move to the next slide. And the last part I'm going to do, I'm going to skip the other slides, but I'm going to put links to the fact sheets, which we have mentioned. And these fact sheets were created by our Immigrant and Refugee Youth Champion Group to talk about some of the key aspects of working with this audience. The other link in there is going to link to some of our previous webinars that were more specific around issues affecting working with the population, including marketing and recruitment. And then the third link is going to be to the Access, Equity, and Belonging website. And there are a lot of great resources about working with all kinds of audiences on that website. And the last thing before we go to the evaluation, someone had mentioned the Ubuntu, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I keep hearing that terminology, Ubuntu, and I've looked it up in the past, which is an African worldview, that's the word I'm using, that talks about humans, we are only human through the humanity of others. I'm stealing Melanie's words. And I want to talk about that because some of our programs that have been most successful working with immigrant and refugee youth reflect the worldview concepts from where they come. An example is many states have had success recruiting immigrant and refugee youth into teen teaching programs. And part of that is because teens want to have an effect in their community in a way they can. So creating programs that match up with the values and expectation and worldview of the families is really important. So that's it for the promising practices, and we're going to move on to slide number 38.
So thank you for participating with us, but we would love your feedback in the forms that we have. We just have 3 questions and we want your feedback. Please take your time to kind of respond to some of the questions we have, because that will help us to prepare for our next webinar series, what we are planning to do. And it's like one of the questions is, what's a new idea that you learned or relearned today that made your light bulbs go away? And if you can go into the chat boxes and go into the slide deck and respond, that would be really powerful. The second question, share any example of a program. I've seen, Rosa, you've mentioned Accelerante, which is a very powerful program. I know if there are other programs that your extension office, please share with us. That would be very powerful for us to know and learn them, and invite people to our refugee and immigrant champion group to share some of the ways that they do programming that has been successful. And then what can you do to leverage these resources? How are you going to share about us and about what you learned today? That would be powerful again. And were there topics that you expected to learn that you did not hear? That would be, again, something we would definitely want to hear from you. Please take 2 minutes to respond to us. That would be very kind. Yeah, please definitely go to slide number and respond to that, like 40 slide, like, what topics that you're expecting to learn. That would be very powerful if you would respond to us on that one. We definitely would like to know what topics you want us to share with you more on refugee and immigrant. And then do look out for the January 10th PYD session, that is positive youth development session that is coming from the Thrive. That's also going to be part of the Access Equity Belonging Committee. We will be doing advertising for that, but please sign up for that. That will give you a lot of information as how all the champion groups are working to provide much more knowledge and input around refugee, immigrant, or LGBT, or any other champion groups.
So again, want to thank everyone for being here. Also like to thank our presenters today. As you can see, their names on there. We'll also, if you have any questions, please feel free to continue to reach out and let us know, and we can forward any questions along. Again, this webinar is going to be posted on our website, so you'll be able to go back and review it and look at different or look at all the things that were talked about. We just once again like to thank everyone for participating, and again, thank you to our panel so much. It was a lot to uncover and a lot to unpack. I particularly loved really having that realization of all the different challenges that are there. I mean, we know it, but actually putting a name to it just really makes it that much more powerful. So really, again, appreciate you all for being here. So
Philip, can I just say thank you to you and the SCIFAR PDTA Center for hosting us.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Phil. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we will see you all next time. Our next webinar is actually going to be what month this is in. Okay, so yeah, I'm all confused. So our next webinar is going to actually be next year. So we look forward to seeing you all again. Again, make sure you fill out this pop-up survey that's going to pop up to give us feedback of on this webinar, and then also give us ideas about different things that you are looking forward to see to help you within your SCIFAR mission. Thank you so much again for joining us, and we will see you all next time.